Why It's Always Wrong to Lie. 5-Minute Philosophy Lessons with Dr. Andrew Israelsen. Why is lying wrong? I suppose more basically we might start off by asking, is lying wrong? It's usually held to be, but why? Perhaps it's because lying hurts people. But does it always? Oftentimes lying can be used for positive consequences, desirable effects. Sometimes we lie to spare the feelings of other people. Sometimes we lie to keep people out of danger. Sometimes we lie in order to avoid facing great amounts of pain that telling the truth would bring to ourselves and to others. So sometimes lying doesn't hurt people, but does the opposite. Perhaps lying is wrong because God forbids it. But problems abound here, and not only problems of, belief or disbelief in a God in the first place, and questions of verifying the various putative revelations claimed by this or that world sect or world tradition, but even granting the legitimacy of some sort of set of revelations, we might still wonder, does God forbid lying because it's wrong, or is lying wrong because God forbids it? Which way does it go? Because if God forbids it because it's intrinsically wrong, then it seems to have some sort of moral status independent of God. However, if it's only wrong because God happens to forbid it, then it seems as though it's arbitrary and God could have commanded or forbidden anything, which seems dissatisfying. Perhaps it isn't really wrong in the first place, but it's simply a socially constructed norm that is prudent to generally follow. Well, I believe that lying is morally wrong, and not just some of the time, but universally. And I believe that because I was convinced by the arguments of Immanuel Kant, a Prussian philosopher from the years 1724 to 1804, who argued for a pure moral philosophy, setting aside all material goals, all desires, all consequences of actions, and all considerations of human nature, how we're wired, what we want, the things that we happen to materially desire. He instead asks whether there is a law that holds for a will as such. Is there any law that is a law for a pure rational will, not simply a human being or a human will, but any type of rational will, whether it be human, angel, God, or another type of possible intelligent life? And he argues that there is such a law. It can't consist of a merely possible law or hypothetical imperative that holds for this or that person on the basis of this or that desire. For example, we might give a hypothetical imperative of the form, if you want to improve your skiing, you should work on your core strength. Now, the imperative, you should work on your core strength, is only an imperative for those who happen to have this goal, or one, in which core strength would help them. But it's not a goal, or an imperative that holds for all persons always. But the law that Kant is asking about is not merely some hypothetical imperative designed to meet some social good, whether it's to improve one's skiing or to bring about, public safety. Instead, he's asking about the moral law, the law that gives categorical imperatives that are binding for any and all rational agents. The first formulation of this categorical imperative, the first aspect we'll look at, is the universal law imperative formulation, the universal law aspect. He presents the centerpiece of his moral philosophy, the categorical imperative, as follows. I should always act such that the maxim of my action can stand as a universal law. The maxim is simply the subjective rule I'm following when I act. So I should always act such that the rule that I'm following can stand as a universal law for all wills. In other words, my action must be such that all others can engage in it without a contradiction arising in my will. What does this mean? What does this look like in practice? Well, let's go back to lying. It's always immoral to lie, because to lie is to act in an irrational and self-contradictory way. For example, suppose I find myself in need of money, but I don't feel like working to get it. I hit upon an idea. I go to my friend Steve and say, Steve, old friend, lend me $50 and I will pay you back next week. Now, what must be the case in order for Steve to make the loan? What does he have to believe? Well, he must believe I'm telling the truth. He must believe me. If he knows I'm lying, it won't work. But what if everyone acted the way that I am proposing to act right now? That is, what if everyone always followed the maxim of my action, which is, I will make lying promises when it suits me to do so? In such a world, no one would believe anything that anyone said. Thus, Steve would not believe me right now and would not make the loan, and my act would not succeed. This is why even liars hate liars, because they are relying upon everyone else following the rule in order for them to get away with breaking it. Another way to consider this same issue is to consider the second formulation of the categorical imperative, what Kant calls the formula of humanity. And he says here something very beautiful, that human beings are ends in themselves. So the formula of universality that we just considered established the form of a goodwill, namely universality or universalizability. But another way to make the same point is to focus on the end or ultimate goal and purpose of moral action, which is human beings themselves. To lie to someone is to treat them as a mere means to my own ends. But a human being, Kant says, is not a thing to be used for this or that discretionary purpose, but must always be treated as an end in itself, never as a mere means. To lie is to treat someone else as a tool, as a thing, as a stepping stone to my own purposes, and that is a deeply immoral thing to do.